This week we visit the Elliott School of International Affairs at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. On this program, you'll meet foreign exchange students from China, Ukraine, and Nigeria. We'll find out why they came here, what their American experience has been, and what they'll take back to their home countries. This is America and the World. This is America and the World is brought to you by Japan, history, hospitality, and advanced technology, sharing tomorrow. The Washington Diplomat, a world of news and perspective. The Sultanate of Oman. The U.S.-China Education Trust and F.Y. Chang Foundation. Julia Chang Block, President. The Rotendaro Family Trust. The Forerunner Foundation, dedicated to forward-thinking public policy. And the Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings. Claire, thank you for coming over.
Thank you, sir, for the invitation.
I'll give you an official family name.
So the official, that's a good question because I'm Chinese. So the official name is Haiqi, Haiqi, and last name Zhou.
And how did you come by Claire?
Well, that's well, I came across that questions almost every time when I live in this country. People ask, "What is your real name?" And I say, Claire is a real name because I have been using this name for over 10 years, even when I was in China. Like I worked in an international organization, so that's why I come with this name, Claire.
It's easier for Americans, huh?
Totally.
Tell me a little bit about your growing up in China and your family.
Well, I grew up in Beijing, where is the capital of China, and I'm the single child. Well, the policy, single child policy in China. So I grew up with all my friends who are have the same or similar situation in their family. And like my parents retired last year. Right now they're currently living in Beijing. I think they're enjoying their life.
How did you come up with this idea of studying abroad?
Well, it's a dream I'm always pursuing for. I was always pursuing for. Different from most of international students in this country, they come right after graduation of high school or undergraduate education. I worked several years before I came, but I understand the U.S. have one of the best education system in the world, and your country with a lot of resources in education, and you have so many good schools. So I was dreaming for almost 7 years to come, and finally I made it. So here I am.
And how did you end up at George Washington University?
So it's a very prestigious school, and Elliott School is one of the the most excellent international affairs schools internationally. So I choose several schools in different cities of the United States, but I had my preference at the moment. I was hoping that I can get some school from DC because I'm especially attracted by the vibe and the environment in DC, very international vibe.
So you went to school at the Elliott School,
yes,
right?
I did.
And got your degree. And now where has that taken you?
Well, that question is quite a to the end question. I will switch to the beginning.
Okay.
So I choose to study at Elliott School is because I always want to work for the United Nations. That's kind of my dreaming job and a career. And I understand, if I want to work for the United Nations, I need to have a master's degree, basically speaking, for most of the jobs available. So you ask me about my career path, and that's how this master degree is leveraging me to my career path. I'm in the process of applying and got interviewed with UN agencies, offices in different countries. Yeah.
So what are you doing now?
So now I'm working as a part-time instructor at a private organization in DC. We train US diplomats or government staff in languages in US-China issues.
So American diplomats who may be going to serve in China? Huh?
Exactly.
What do we misunderstand about China? Give a couple of things that we should know about China.
Finally, the hard question coming, huh? I was waiting for that.
Well, we put it later in the conversation.
Yeah, we Chinese people say you start a conversation rough, but Americans start a conversation easily and go to the later.
So that's very cultural, huh?
Cultural cross.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Ah.
Yeah, I think that's the differences between U.S. and China.
Tell me more.
Yeah, you mean culturally? You mean, well, I think what interesting is U.S. and China shares a lot in common nowadays, in economy, in even in like the structure of the country, or in because China right now is catching up U.S. Everybody say of that. But what people didn't see is how difficult for those two countries to communicate. Because my expertise is in communication and international communications. I found we thought we know each other very well, but only if when you have a Chinese come to the United States to receive a U.S. Education, or a American go to China and to live together and work together with local Chinese, then you'll realize how big the communication differences we are and how much we need to polish and to learn about each other.
We must understand each other, huh?
Exactly.
Tell me your thinking about student exchange and how you've benefited by coming here to the United States.
Wow, I'm tremendously appreciate the opportunities I can have to come to this country as a foreign student to receive one of the most optimal education in the world. It's all thanks to the U.S.-China education exchange, and also the like I got a visa to come here, and U.S. Embassy gave me that visa. If I would say 30 years ago or 50 years ago in my parents' generation, it's something they will dream for, but they never have a chance to get. But I'm the lucky one. So I got approved by the U.S. government as a legal student, come over and to enjoy the equal resources that all the international students can have here.
What is the most important thing that you've learned about America?
The open mind.
Us.
Yes, the open mind of Americans, American society, and this country. Like how generous this country is to me and to other international students.
So you're going to stay for a while? Will you go back home at some point?
I want to go back. Like most of Chinese students, we have our root in China, and that's part of Chinese culture. So I learned things here, but one day I will go back, and then I can develop more there.
And your country will so benefit because of your experience here and because you're such a warm and wonderful person.
Thank you so much, sir. It's a great pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Yes.
Alex, thank you so much for visiting with us this afternoon.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to talk to you.
How did you end up at the Elliott School for International Affairs?
For many years, I worked with American citizens in Ukraine, actually. I was helping people adopt in Ukraine, from Ukraine, and also helped exchange programs for Ukrainian orphans who would come to Ukraine and spend some time here, and then would bring in the culture understanding, new experiences, new life into where they are from. And further on, I worked with humanitarian organization, with International Medical Corps in the east of Ukraine, in the conflict-affected zone, and then with the Red Cross Society. So I decided that I need another degree in international development to be more qualified for project management and in the international development.
So what would be your long-term goal? What would be the ideal position that you'd want when you go back home?
I hope, since I'm focusing on gender development, so in the future I hope to work in social service department, social service ministry of Ukraine, where I would be responsible for the gender issues and gender equality promotion.
What was your reaction as you watched the American women's soccer team win the World Cup? And what does that mean culturally for the United States and for the world?
I think, first of all, the amount of attention which this cup this year attracted already represents higher understanding of the importance of the equality of women in the world. And the fact, it doesn't matter really who would win to me because I'm not American, so, but
Sure.
however, I congratulate and US with this important win. However, I think a lot of people still are more drawn and would say that soccer and like a lot of like competitive sports are more of a male domain in many ways. And the fact that this becomes more and more interesting to general public shows the shift in this in the direction.
When you at some point go back home to Ukraine, and now you have a new president, you have a new government, how will that show up in your work in this area of gender equality? What will you take with you from the United States from your studies here?
I would say that even though we sometimes do not see these different or try not to see these differences, even here in the United States, where women are highly emancipated, where we can speak about LGBTIQ openly and protect rights of representatives of these genders and sexual orientation. On the other hand, in Ukraine, these questions are not as open. They're not as brought up. This is where we can talk about it, we can draw attention to this question, and we can try to achieve better equality.
Will what you're learning here and what you're going to take back home when you go after you have your degree, will this new knowledge or this new experience that you're seeing here in America, will that be welcomed back home?
I think so, because this issue is becoming more and more acute, I think. Society is changing. People have to understand that the previous dynamics between genders has to change, where women have equal power, equal representation. And I also worked in Ukraine with gender-based violence prevention. So this is, and through the knowledge which I receive here, I will be able to provide better support and create better pathways for people to receive support in case of being survivors of violence.
What gave you the idea of coming to America to study in the first place?
I actually thought of studying in another country right after I graduated from my first degree in linguistics. I thought maybe of going into Europe, but since the United States, to my mind, has probably the best educational possibilities here, I was always looking into this direction.
I would say that you probably are an advocate of this idea of student exchange and student education abroad, huh?
I'm very much for it, because I saw people who would spend some time here, who would either study here, maybe work for some time, or even, I saw even orphans who found families here and then returned into Ukraine. And they all brought absolutely new understanding of reality, understanding of the system, and they were much more resilient, much more much stronger in their in approaching complex problems which they see.
I'm glad that you reintroduced this idea of the orphans.
Yes.
Because when you first said that, I said, how is it that an orphan would come to the United States and then go back? How old would they have been when they came here?
Oh, some kids are the youngest child which we helped to adopt was 4 months old.
Oh, so an adoption here in the United States, is that correct?
No, they were in Ukraine, from Ukraine into the United States. Yeah.
And then at some point when they're older, they go back home?
Very few, but it happens. So, and even then, they try to preserve the experience of American life.
And how old would they be when they go back?
18, 19, 20, about this age.
So they have the best of both possible worlds when they go home, huh?
Yeah. Or some I know children who, and also their parents, who continue relationship with Ukraine, go there on a regular basis, try to support children over there.
Excellent. And then come back to the States.
Yes.
Alex, thank you so much for the education, and I wish your country well with your new president.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for sitting with us.
Of course.
Tell me your full name.
My full name is Olamide Ogunlowo.
Oh, say it again slowly. It's so beautiful.
Olamide Ogunlowo.
Ah, and in America, did you adopt a kind of an easy name for us to handle?
I guess so, yes.
And is it Lami?
Lami, yes.
Lami. And tell me your background. Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. And then I went to boarding school in Canada when I was 15, just before my 16th birthday. Graduated high school there, and then came to the States, went to Syracuse University, and now GW.
How did you end up at Syracuse?
I liked Canada, but I wanted to change. And Syracuse was a school that was really good for what I wanted to do, which was economics.
Oh, yes.
And that's why I ended up there.
Uh-huh. But you've done some study abroad or working abroad during the course of getting your degrees, huh?
Yes, I have. Even though it's technically abroad, because I am abroad. But I studied abroad in France, in Strasbourg, and also in Hong Kong.
Uh-huh. So is family back in Nigeria?
Yes, my family's in Nigeria, and I have a sister who goes to Cornell.
She goes to Cornell. And is she interested in economics as well?
She's more a business person, but her major is really fancily named. And so we're not really sure what exactly it entails.
So, when you think of it, sometime into the future, all of this wonderful experience that you've had at Syracuse in Canada, coming from Nigeria, working in Hong Kong, and also in France, how is that all going to come together? What would be the ideal job for you sometime in the future?
I have a lot of interests, so I don't really have one ideal job. I have multiple, and so I now look at it as a step-by-step process. So the first job I would want out of school will probably be consulting or something to do with geopolitical risk. And I would work for a few years and go back and get my PhD and try to end up in a multilateral.
Whoa. What do you make of America in your studies here?
It's a very interesting, complex place. I think growing up, everybody looks at it, well, in Nigeria, everybody looks at it as this place where life is so easy and everything is great. You don't have power outages. You can have all the services that the government provides. And then you come here and you realize there's still a lot of problems. And no one is essentially talking to each other. We're all just talking at each other.
Help me understand that a little bit more. About what topics and about what what areas are we talking past each other?
I would say a lot of issues, and I think going to Syracuse and then coming here, I've really understood both sides, because I met people who, they were the first people in their families to go to college.
Yes.
You know, or they were from a really small town in Pennsylvania where people still drive tractors in the street for fun. And then you come here and everyone is super well traveled and has been to over 20 countries, and it's just that dichotomy.
As an African and as a black woman, have you been treated well here?
I will say I have.
What do you make of the difference in attitude, in experience, in worldview of Africans who come to study and African Americans?
A lot of it is where you grow up. I think growing up here, when a lot of people you see on TV or a lot of the people in power are not the same skin tone as you, that can cause you to, in a way, like you don't have representation, so you don't see yourself, or you see yourself as beneath. I'm struggling to put this in words, I'm sorry.
I've asked you a very complex question, but you can really educate us.
I think I'm going to start the other way. So I tell people that I grew up in a society where most people are black, most people are my color, and the leaders, everyone on the street essentially is black. So I don't really see a lot of things from a lens of race. Yes, I acknowledge it, that it's there, and I do see it, and I know when it happens, but I don't look at every situation as a race issue, even though a lot of times there are underlying tones. But I think when you grow up in a society where everything is so there's so much attention on the issue, and rightly so, because it is a problem, that there is a lot of, there are just a lot of feelings there.
And understandable?
Understandable.
Very much so.
Very understandable.
Thank you for struggling with that and articulating it, because we can learn from you. You know, your view of how difficult a situation that we've created for ourselves here is, and that we struggle with and try to improve. Sometimes some steps forward, and then sometimes, but it really has to do with the lens that you're looking at life through, huh? And if you come from Africa, you've had one experience. If you've grown up in America, you've had a totally different experience. Huh? What is the value of you studying here and you being able to make these observations about America?
For one thing, a better education. To be able to make the changes I want to make in the world and to achieve the things that my parents necessarily were not able to. And it also opens your eyes to a better understanding of the world. You can see where everyone is coming from, and even if you don't necessarily understand it or agree with it, it gives you some perspective when you have to put yourself in their shoes.
With all of the experience that you've had, and now your experience here in Washington with the Elliott School, you're blessed, aren't you, to have had this wonderful opportunity, huh?
Definitely.
Yeah. What are you going to take back home? Single thing, one thing. What can you take back home about what you've learned here in America?
I would say that the system is imperfect, and many African countries should stop trying to model their system based on the West, especially America or the UK. because both systems do have their flaws. That would probably be the single biggest thing.
Africa is vast.
It is.
South Africa to Egypt,
Yes.
55 countries, many cultures. And U.S. has kind of ignored Africa for such a long period of time. We'll try to do better. Thank you for visiting with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. For information about This Is America in the World, visit our website, thisisamerica.net, or our YouTube channel, This Is America TV, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. This Is America in the World is brought to you by Japan, history, hospitality, and advanced technology, sharing tomorrow. The Washington Diplomat, a world of news and perspective. The Sultanate of Oman. The U.S.-China Education Trust and F.Y. Chang Foundation, Julia Chang Block, President. The Rotendaro Family Trust. The Forerunner Foundation, dedicated to forward-thinking public policy. And the Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings.